Alright, today I am drinking lemon and ginger tea from Tea Pigs. I was gonna drink something high in energy and high in caffeine because I was gonna record right after work, but didn't happen, so I'm recording at 7 o'clock at night and I'm drinking something to relax. So I'm back here today to review Netflix's adaptation of Joe Hill's Locke and Key graphic novel. If you're interested in my review of the books, check out my separate video. It'll be in this link, whatever corner it's in. Check out that review. Spoilers for it if you haven't seen it. If you have seen it, I loved it. The plot was a little slow. It was very character driven. But the cast was amazing, so you didn't mind and you really cared about them. And I thought it was really good. That said, I guess the best word to sum up my feelings towards the Netflix adaptation is disappointing. Let's get into it. I think it'd be really hard for me to give like an actual objective review on this since, I really have some heavy the book was better goggles on today. It's been pretty well received by most people. A couple friends of mine that watched it put stuff up on Twitter that said, they really liked it. It's got a 7.5 out of 10 on IMDb. It's 67% on Rotten Tomatoes, so like not great, but not terrible. I watched this last week. I was home because I had break because I guess it's a New England thing. I don't know. But I watched it with Ben and our parents, and none of them seemed terribly impressed. My mom gave kind of her usual, that was weird kind of review. Ben thought the characters were bad. Wasn't sure if it was like an acting issue or a writing issue. Uh, I kind of agree with him, which crushes me because the characters were the best part of the book. So to get into the show and the characters to be the weakest part really, really hurts. And then my dad just kind of thought it was okay. Now, to be fair, their review is maybe a little colored by the fact that I spent the entire time going, oh, what? The whole time, just with general confusion and annoyance because it was just so drastically different than the comics. I guess the best way to say it is it just felt like a really watered down version of the books. Less violence, less gore, less edgy, and less of the fantasy elements, less of the magic. There was less of the exploration of grief that drove the comics. So it just felt like everything was just kind of filtered through a lens and made easier. I think two things kind of maybe, possibly, this is all speculation on my part, caused that. One was that this is clearly an R adult graphic novel comic. What's the difference? Anyway, graphic novel series. It was gory, there was nudity, it was very clearly an adult comic. And they made it into a TV-14 show, and I gotta be honest, it was barely TV-14. People got stabbed and there wasn't even blood. Like, really, really toned down. So I think that's one of the things, was that it just kind of watered it down to make it appropriate for a younger audience. But I also think there was, whether it was a budgeting issue or what, they didn't use a lot of special effects. There were a couple scenes, but there was much less than what there would have been if it was a more faithful adaptation. So I think that might have limited them a little bit on the more fantastic elements. Still recommend you give it a chance. If you haven't read it, haven't watched it, give it a chance. It's mostly good. I just don't really think it holds a candle to what it was based on. You might want to look up some reviews on your own other than mine to give you a better idea, maybe from people that haven't read the books or aren't fans of the books, just because that might give you a better idea if you're not a fan of the books whether or not you should get into it. At this point, really, there's not a lot more I can say without getting into spoilers, whether for the books or for the show. So, if you haven't seen Locke and Key Season 1 on Netflix, if you haven't read all 6 volumes of Locke and Key, I'm gonna ask that you step away. I will say the show deviated quite strongly from the books and was clearly setting up a second season, so even if you've watched the show but haven't read the books, I might suggest you step away because there might be something I talk about in this that comes up in future seasons. I do try to avoid that in my stuff I talk about. I try to be a little vaguer about things that might come up later, but just a heads up. I'm going to steal, for talking about adaptations, I'm going to steal Dominic Noble's format for Lost in Adaptation, which is just going through what they kept, what they changed, and what they left out. Of course, this won't be nearly as quality as his videos because I didn't take notes or anything, so this is just me typing up based on memory. And therefore, it's kind of more the stuff that I considered important, or what stood out to me, not necessarily a more objective view of everything, if that makes sense. So, what they kept the same. The general premise of the show is still the same. It starts with Phil Lester, a troubled young boy, shows up at the home of Rendell Locke during a vacation. Rendell is his guidance counselor. He starts asking him these questions about keys, and then the conflict turns heated, and it results in Phil shooting Rendell dead. It's later revealed that Phil acted and did this on behalf of a woman that he knows as Dodge, because she promised him a better life in exchange for finding certain keys for her. The Locke family is really scarred by this experience, the remaining Locke family, so that's uh, Nina Locke, Rendell's wife, and his 3 children, and they move to the ancestral home of the Locks, known as Key House, on an island just off the coast of New England. Bodhi is the youngest of the Locke children, and he starts discovering keys hidden around the house that can be used for fantastical purposes, such as turning a person into a ghost. He also finds a woman living in the bottom of the well at the well house that says she's his echo and asks him for favors. Meanwhile, the older Locke kids, Kinsey and Tyler, are just trying to figure out how they can fit in and make life work in the new home and their new school. Ty is really haunted by the fact that he had made an offhand comment to Phil about wanting his father to be killed, that he assumes may have been the cause for Phil shooting his dad. He tries to fit in with the more popular kids at school and does pretty okay at this. He joins the hockey team, which he does considerably worse at. Kinsey, on the other hand, decides the best option is just to hide, to disappear. So she starts dressing and acting like an ordinary everyday girl in order to fade more into the background. Later, with the help of her friend Scott, she returns to her punk ways and shines more true to herself. Later on, Bodhi shows Kinsey and Ty the head key after he finds it, which is a key that allows you to access your brain, basically. Kinsey uses this key to remove her fear, which is one of the things she's felt has held her back. Ty, meanwhile, uses the key to, learn stuff by, putting books in his head. The Echo eventually escapes the well house using the Anywhere key, which had been hidden in a bracelet that Kinsey had gotten as a gift from her dad. The Echo, which is later revealed to be Dodge, stays with one of the high school faculty, Ellie, appearing to her as Lucas. Lucas, Ellie, and a few others were close friends of Rendell while he was in high school. They would play with the keys and called themselves the Keeper of the Keys. Duncan, Rendell's brother and the uncle of the Locke children, saw them playing often but was kind of kept at arm's reach and pushed away. Things went south with the Keepers when they decided to try to open a mysterious door in a cave off the coast of this island, at which point Lucas got infected with the demon, which made him kind of go off the deep end, and everything went south from there. Dodge, throughout the series, occasionally harasses the Locke kids, trying to get more keys from them. Kinsey, with her fear remove, has some struggles with her friendship, which includes dating 2 different boys at the same time, which results in her having no friends until they eventually work everything out. Dodge helps Phil escape from jail at one point, where he returns to kind of harass the Locks looking for the keys before he is attacked by, attacked by Ty, and then eventually gets forced through the ghost door, which results in him dying. While his ghost still hangs around, though, his body is considered dead and removed. Other than the major plot points, which is what I basically covered there, there's a few other things that were kept. Ellie has a mentally disabled son that sees the whole world as a action movie. The keys almost always reveal themselves to children. Also, the fact that adults forget when they get older, or are just incapable of understanding the magic of the house. Certain keys were kept from the books, so the Ghost Key, the Shadow Key, the Well Key, and the Omega Key, namely, were kept. I think those were the only ones. Moving on to the things that they did change. The town Key House is found in was originally called Lovecraft, and that was switched to Matheson. I can make assumptions about why that choice would be made. Phil's escape from prison happened much sooner in the books than in the show. Bodhi couldn't find the Anywhere key for Dodge, so the Echo helped Phil escape from prison, and he's the one that eventually got the Anywhere key out of Kinsey's bracelet and gave it to Dodge. The keys were not all sourced from the books. There were some keys that were just fabrications of the show. This includes the Mirror Key, the Flower Key, and the Fire Key. The Gender Key and Race Key in the books weren't in there. I would say those were kind of combined into the Appearance Key. You can kind of understand why they would make that choice. Ellie and Aaron swapped races in the adaptation. So in the comics, Ellie was a white woman. Aaron was a black woman who was in the asylum because she would just mutter the word white, white over and over again and had an extreme negative reaction to any white people she interacted with. This is where the race key came in the comics. Kinsey and Bodhi made themselves Pac in order to go talk to Aaron. And, well, this kind of had some nice messages about microaggressions and systemic racism and things that the kids then learned firsthand. It's pretty easy to see why they maybe got rid of this one. Alright, speaking of Kinsey, I don't really know how to sum up my feelings about Kinsey on this. She was just very bland in the show. So in the comics, she started out really punk. She had like an undercut and wore cool clothes and had her hair dyed a bright color. And so it was a very extreme change when she went to, straight blonde hair and basic white girl preppy clothes. And then the decision when she decided to be herself again was equally thing. She shaved like half her head and went just completely punk. In the show, her punk version is dyeing a streak of her hair pink and putting it in a funky ponytail. Like, you barely saw the change from one to the other. Scott also got really watered down from his much edgier comic version. Dodge and Kinsey is also kind of a weird thing that was kind of kept, but not really. In the graphic novels, Dodge immediately uses the gender key to turn back into Lucas. This makes a lot of sense. The Echo was an echo of Lucas, so it makes sense for him to prefer that form. He then attended school with the Locks, posing as Ellie's nephew, like he did in the show. And there he befriended Ty and then eventually started dating Kinsey. It's actually Kinsey's friendship with Scott that pulled her away from that relationship. The show at the end reveals that they are keeping the Kinsey Dodge dating thing, but it's all done without the audience knowing, and also they have her date Scott first. We'll talk about that one a little bit later. In the comics, Ty dates Kim, a blonde wannabe actress that's much more similar to the TV show's Eden than she is to Jackie. She's actually the one that gives the whole better hurt you now than later speech that Ty gives to Jackie in the show. Not that it had an impact. The hatred Kinsey had for Eden in the show that eventually developed into like a grudging respect is actually very similar to Kinsey and Kim's relationship in the comics. So that was kind of nice to see represented. Duncan. I don't know if I should include Duncan in the things they changed or the things they left out category. He was in the show, technically speaking, but barely. In the comics, he had a much larger role. He provided a lot of moral support for the Locks. He got caught up in some of the conflicts that happened. And he even had a whole side plot where his boyfriend got injured due to all the stuff happening with Dodge. So he had just a much bigger role to play. This might come up more in the second season when Dodge is trying harder to get rid of everybody that has memories of him as Lucas. I don't know. So that's a maybe on that one that we'd have to wait for the second season to know more. Nina Locke, on the other hand, gets a much larger role in the show. In the comics, she was drunk for most of the series. She was an alcoholic basically from the start. She basically started drinking when her husband died and didn't really stop. In the middle, though, she does have a moment where she sobers up, starts to clean herself up until Dodge forces her to drink an entire bottle of wine until she passes out. In the show, she's only an alcoholic for like one episode. It barely has an impact. The rest of the time, she's spending digging into her husband's past, which was all stuff that the kids did in the comics. The Ed Key in the comics actually opened up your head for people to look into, and you could rummage around with your hand, but you couldn't walk into it the way it was represented in the show. This actually had some surprising implications in the story. Erin went insane because Dodge had pulled out pretty much all of her memories, but the tiny little memories were running around and actually helped them at different points, especially in the climax. And then Dodge also had some things he did involving his tiny memory people. So they kind of lost that. Rendell's choice to open the black door wasn't just like a urge or a lust to open it. The demons that came out of the door, which we're not going to even talk about how they were represented in the show. The demons, if they didn't find a host in our world, turned to metal. That metal was then used to forge the keys. Rendell wanted to use that metal to forge a key that would make it so the keepers never forget. Of course, that failed, and so then the keepers, the ones that survived, forgot about the keys just like everybody else does. And finally, moving on to the things they left out altogether. Kinsey's friends and relationships. Look, guys, I'll be honest, Kinsey was my absolute favorite character in the comics, and she really got screwed over in this show. So, Jackie was Kinsey's friend that she met during track practice. It was like the first person she attached herself to. They had a falling out after the whole almost drowning in the drowning caves thing, which was Scott's plan in the beginning, in the comics, not Kinsey's. Scott's best friend at the time was Jamal. The actual conflict in their group comes from the fact that Kinsey shows both Scott and Jamal her most happy memories, and that's kind of seen as a cheating thing. Sorry, there was a weird sound. In the end, Jamal and Kinsey actually bond more because they've both lost a parent, and they are the ones that end up together. And then Scott and Jackie end up dating, and I'm not talking about it, okay? Where's Ty's hat? Look, I know this is dumb, but hear me out. Like, he always wore it, and Netflix gave it like a 30-second cameo in the last episode. The hat, and especially the lore on the hat, actually played a kind of important role. It's one of those things that they might be creating a whole plot hole later on down the road. There are quite a few keys we didn't see at all. The animal key, the giant key, but any of these might make an appearance later in future seasons, so. Part of Ty's trauma in the comics wasn't just that, like, he thought he might be the reason his dad died. He also did make it into the house, and he beat Phil with a brick rather brutally. And his anger is one of the, like, continuing struggles he faces the entire story. There's quite a bit more that was left out, but I'm pretty sure at this point most of it's going to be things that might come up in the future seasons. So some of the things that fall into this that I won't give details for. The big epic showdown ending, obviously that wasn't here because they instead are having a second season. I really hope we get that when they actually have the show's finale. There's an entire backstory to Key House and the Locks that wasn't there. I hope they incorporate this, and I hope they incorporate the time key into it because it was really well done, even if it was a big kind of info dump. And then there's a lot of stuff with the ghost key that got cut, and this is where I assume it's largely because of special effect reasons. I'm not going to give the details as much as I want to talk about it because it's cool, but it involves body swapping and some very, very clever work on Dodge's part that I kind of hope show up in the next season. Alright, that's definitely not comprehensive by any means, but it's enough to cover why I felt this failed as an adaptation. It wasn't a bad show per se, but it just didn't live up to the books for me. Especially when it comes to character stuff, I just felt like it fell flat. Fell flat. Anyway, I'll see you guys in the next video.